Welcome to this YSL Report Builder 2016 tutorial. In this part of the series, we'll explain how to create nested parent and child groups in tables. We'll start with a quick reminder of how you can apply a single group expression to a table, and then look at how you can expand that expression to include multiple fields. We'll remind you of how to add aggregate functions such as counts and sums to a table, and then move on and look at how you can create a nested parent and child group. When we've done that, we can create totals and subtotals for the parent and child groups. We'll also look at how you can separate groups using page breaks, and then finish the video by showing you how far you can go by creating multiple levels of nesting. So quite a lot to do in this one. Let's get started. To get started, I've created a new blank report in Report Builder, and I'm going to create a new data source which connects to the YSL Movies database. Just the usual quick reminder that if you don't already have a copy of that database, we do have a video which explains exactly how to install it, and there's a link in the video description that you can use to get hold of a script that will help you with that. Assuming you've got to that point, let's head back to Report Builder and right-click the Data Sources folder and choose to add a new data source. Again, if you've already got a shared data source from a previous video in the series, feel free to use that one. Otherwise, write a new name for your new data source. I'll call mine Movies. Ask to use a connection embedded in the report. Click the Build button to get a bit of help with building your connection string. Type in your server name, mine's SQL 2016 training, and then you can select the database you want to use, in my case Movies, from the drop-down list at the bottom. We can then click OK a couple of times, and that's our data source created. In this example, I'd like to create a single table which shows data grouped by multiple fields. To get started with that, let's create a data set which returns all the fields we're going to use. I'll right-click on my Movies data source and choose to add a data set. I'll call the data set something like Films, and then use the query designer to help me build it. From my tables list, I'll start by expanding the genre table and select the genre field. Then I'll head to the certificate table and choose the certificate field, followed by a few fields from the film table. So we'll group by genre and certificate, and then we'd like to do things like count the film ID, find the sum of runtime minutes, and find the sum of Oscar wins. So let's include the film ID, runtime minutes, and Oscar wins fields as well. Once you have those 5 fields, click OK a couple of times, and that's our dataset created. Now I'd like to create a table which displays the genre followed by the certificate and then the aggregates that I've talked about. Let's get rid of the title text box at the top and then replace that by right-clicking and inserting a new table. I'll drag that to the top left-hand corner of the page. And this first example table is going to be quite simple. I'm going to include the fields in the order I'd like to see them listed. I'll put genre first, followed by certificate. If I just run the report at that stage, what I'll end up with is a separate row for every individual record in the dataset. So that should be about 1200 rows altogether. So it's the genre and the certificate for each individual film. What I'd like to do is create groups for each genre and certificate. So there should be one row with Adventure PG, there should be one row with Adventure 12A, etc, etc, etc. So back into the design view, we can use the Groups panel at the bottom of the screen to make that work. If you can't see that already, head to the View menu and choose Grouping to make that window appear. Currently the only item we have in the Grouping panel is the Details item, which corresponds to the Details row that we currently have in the table. Again, you can see these 3 horizontal bars indicating a detail row on the grey box next to the row of data. We want to group those details by both genre and certificate. So let's start by right-clicking the Details item in the Grouping panel and choosing to view Group Properties. You can also get to the same place, by the way, by right-clicking on the grey box next to the row, choosing Row Group, and then choosing Group Properties from there. So as always, multiple ways to achieve the same thing in Report Builder. Currently the name of the group is called Details. That isn't really a very good name for what we're about to create, so let's change its name to Genre Certificate Group, something along those lines. I wish I'd picked a shorter name now, but there we go, Genre Certificate Group. Now we can just begin adding fields into the group expression box by clicking the Add button. I'll group first of all by genre, and then add another field and then group on certificate as well. If I click OK at this point, the results will look a little messy. If I run the report, it's difficult to tell that I've got one single row for each combination of genre and certificate. But if I head back to the design view and then apply a bit of sorting to my group, I can right click on the group in the Groups panel and choose Group Properties. Then on the sorting page of the dialog box, I can add a sort to sort first of all by genre in ascending order, and then a second sort to sort by certificate, also in ascending order. Clicking OK now and then running the report again should show me each combination of genre and certificate, where that combination exists in the underlying dataset. At this point, all I need to do is populate the other columns of the table with the aggregates that I'd like to see. So I'd like to have a count of film ID, sum of runtime minutes, and sum of Oscar wins. If I switch back to the design view and then click into a cell in the table, you should be able to make out on the left-hand side where there were previously 3 horizontal bars indicating a detail row. Now we have this bracket or parenthesis style symbol indicating a group. When you add numeric fields to items in a group, rather than just showing the field itself, Report Builder will attempt to apply an aggregate. With a number, it will always attempt to apply a sum. So for the film ID, I didn't want to sum it, I wanted to count it. So I'm going to click onto the word sum to highlight it in blue. Then I can right click on it, choose Summarize By, and then change that to a count. For the other fields, I can then click and drag those from the dataset list. I can drag runtime minutes and attach that to the right-hand side of the table. That will automatically apply a sum, which is what I want. Then likewise for the Oscar wins, I'll get a sum of Oscar wins. At this stage now, if I run the query again or run the report again, I'll see the count of film ID, sum of runtime minutes, and sum of Oscar wins for each certificate and genre combination. Now, although the information we can see here might be quite useful, the layout of the table isn't particularly nice. I dislike seeing the same genre listed multiple times in the first column. It's also difficult to get information about, for example, the total count of all the action films, or the total sum of runtime minutes for action films, etc. When we just have a single group with multiple fields in the group expression, it's not a particularly helpful layout for the table. So what we'll do is replace this table with one which contains multiple nested groups. Let's head back to the design view and then get rid of the existing table by selecting it and then pressing delete on the keyboard. Let's add in a fresh table by right-clicking and then choosing Insert Table. And I'm going to build this table in a slightly different order to the way I built the previous one. Earlier I included the genre field first and then the certificate table. This time I'm going to do it the opposite way round. I'm going to start with the lowest level of detail that I want to see, so that's a group for each certificate, and then I'm going to subsequently add the genre field at the higher level of detail. So let's start by adding the certificate field to the table, and I'm going to apply a group expression to that row to make sure that that row is grouped by certificate. So I can right click on that row, I can choose Row Group and choose Group Properties. I can then change the name of this group so that it's called Certificate Group. I'll type that properly, there we go. And then I can add a group expression and group by just one single field this time, the certificate field. While I'm here, I'm also going to head to the sorting page and choose to add a sort so that my certificates are sorted in ascending order of certificate. Then I can click OK and there's my basic grouped table configured. If we give this report a quick test run, we should see a table appears with one row for each certificate in the dataset. At this point, what I'd like to do is repeat this group section for every genre in the dataset as well. To do that, we can create a parent group using the genre field. So let's head back to the design view, and we can either right-click on an item in the table, or we can right-click on the group in the grouping panel, choose Add Group, and choose Parent Group. I then get to choose which field I'd like to use to create the parent group with, so that's going to be the genre field. And although we can do this later, I'm going to add a group header and a group footer at this stage. So I'll check both boxes. At that point I'm going to click OK, and then we should see some fairly significant changes made to both the table and the groups panel. So we can see we've inserted a new group called genre, which sits above the certificate group, and the certificate group is indicated as indented below the genre field, indicating it's a child of the genre parent. You can see a similar thing with the symbols in the grey bars to the left of the table. You can see you've got your standard group parenthesis or bracket for the certificate field, but also a larger one for the genre field, which covers 3 separate rows. So this is the header and the footer row that we included. Let's have a look at what that appears like when we run the report. We should see that that group section of certificates is repeated for each individual genre in the dataset. Just before we move on and talk about the other features of these nested groups, I'd like to show you that you could have achieved the exact same result by adding a child group to the genre field. Let's head back to the design view. I just want to show you why I don't tend to do things this way. I find it a little more awkward to work with. Let's insert a new table towards the top of the report, and then let's start this time by adding the genre field. I'll then change the group properties to group on the genre field, so I can choose the row group properties option by right clicking, and then I can change the name of the group to genre group. I'll spell that properly as well, and then add a group expression to group on the genre. While I'm here, I'll head to the sorting page and choose to add a sort for the genre field as well in ascending order. If I click OK at that point and then give the report a quick test run, I should see a table appears with 1 row for each individual genre in the dataset. Now what I'd like to do is insert the certificate groups to the right of each genre so I get the same arrangement as I've already achieved. So let's head back to the design view. I'll select the table that I've just created, and then in the grouping panel I can choose to right click and then this time add a child group. A similar dialog box, I get to choose which field I want to group by, so this time it's the certificate field. So we're basically just doing things in the opposite order to the way we did it in the first table. A child group can't have a header or a footer, and I don't want to show the detailed data in this case, I just want to show the grouped data. So if I click OK, what I assumed would be the sensible approach would be for Report Builder to insert the child group nested inside the genre group to the right hand side. But that's not quite what we get if we click OK. We do get a certificate group nested inside the genre group, and you can see that from the grouping panel down here. You can see that the genre group is clearly superior to the certificate group, and certificate is inserted or indented below the genre. However, the arrangement of the columns is a bit odd. I've got the certificate to the left of genre. I get a header row for the genre group already, but no footer row in this case, you can see here. If I run the report, you can see that the data is arranged in a slightly weird way, so it's a little more effort to get the exact results I want. Back in the design view, what I would probably do would be to assign the genre field to the header row in the left-hand column. Then I'd remove genre from the 2 cells to the right of that. I'd highlight those 2 cells and hit delete. I'd also remove certificate from that cell immediately below genre, and then reassign certificate to the field in the same place as it is in the original table. The last thing I'd need to do is insert a footer row. So that means I'd need to right click on that cell there, choose insert row, and I want to choose to insert this below but outside the group. The group I just right clicked on is the certificate group. So there we go. Eventually I'll end up with the same exact arrangement. I should change the column headers here as well, I suppose, from certificate to genre. There we go. So at that point, if I run the report again, I'll get exactly the same end layout, just with a lot more effort. I've also got these extra rows here, these extra cells displayed with the borders. So I tend to work the first way that I showed you. Start with the inner level of detail and work your way outwards by adding parent groups. So let's just get rid of that extra table I've just drawn and go back to the original one we created. Now let's add a few aggregates into the table. So next door to the certificate name, I'm going to choose the film ID. I'll get the sum of film ID again because I'm adding the field, a numeric field, to a group. But notice I get the sum on 2 separate rows, one for the certificate group, but also one for the genre group in the footer. Annoyingly, that means I've got two places in which I need to change it. So let's right click on the sum and summarize by count, and then click on the next one and right click and summarize by count. Before I add any more aggregates, just to show you how those are different, it's the exact same expression of course, but because they're in different positions and within different groups, when I run the report, I first of all get the count of films in the 12 certificated action films and then the 12A certificated action films, and then at the end of that group I get the total number of films in the action genre altogether. So I get totals and subtotals in the same report or the same table. At this point I can carry on then adding extra aggregates. If I switch back to the design view, I can then include the runtime minutes field in the next column, and fortunately I get the sum in there twice, which is what I wanted. Then finally I can drag Oscar wins to the right hand column, and again I'll get the double sums, one for the certificate group and one for the genre group. If I run the report again, I get a full set of aggregates for each combination of genre and certificate. The groups in this particular report don't have many items in them, but if your groups were larger it might make sense to put each group on a separate page. Inserting a page break between each genre is pretty straightforward. Let's head back to the design view and in the grouping panel right click on the genre group and choose to view the group properties dialog. There's a page breaks page on the dialog box. We simply need to check the box to put a page break between each instance of a group. There are a couple of other options. Let me just show you what those mean. If I click OK first without checking the extra options, when I run the report this time, I'll find that my genre groups are separated onto different pages. So action appears on the first page, adventure on the second, and so on and so on. You can also see that on the first page, if I return to the action page, that I've got the overall table headers sitting at the top. If I switch back to the design view and then go back to the group properties dialog box, on the page breaks page there was also an option to put a page break at the beginning of a group. So what this means is that if there were header rows at the top of the table, I could separate out the header rows from the remaining details of the groups. Likewise, if the table has footer rows, I could check this box to add a page break before the footers appear. There aren't any footer rows in the entire table, so let's omit that second checkbox. If I click OK and then run the report, this time we'll see that page 1 has just the column headers for the entire table, and then page 2 is where the action genre starts. It would actually be useful to have those column headers at the top of each instance of a group, so currently we can't really tell what we're looking at in the table. Let's head back to the design view and I'm going to just select the rows the row containing the column headers, and then I'm going to simply Ctrl+C to copy them, click into the blank line in the genre header, and then Ctrl+V to paste. At this point I think it's not really worthwhile having the overall table header, so I'm going to right click next to that row in the table and choose to delete it. A quick bit of basic formatting just to tidy things up, I think. Let's just change the formatting of these column headers. Let's give them a light blue colour and a bold font. And then let's also change the formatting for the genre column as well. Let's give that a slightly darker shade and then maybe a lighter font and make that bold as well. Maybe just worthwhile adding a quick overall or totals indicator into the cell below the list of certificates. Let's call it totals. I know that's not quite 100% accurate, but we'll go with it for now. Again, some basic formatting, and then finally likewise for the aggregates at the bottom, let's give that some basic fill color and make it bold as well. So if we run the report again, we get a slightly better layout and format. It's not beautiful, I admit. I'm pretty awful at formatting. I'm sure you can come up with far better examples than I have here. But just to make some kind of indication of what we're looking at, that doesn't look horrendous, I don't think. For the final part of the video, I just wanted to show you that you can have as many levels of grouping in a table as you like. Let's head back to the design view, and I'm just going to remove the page breaks that I've added from the genre group. If I right click on genre, choose group properties, head to the page breaks page and then uncheck the page breaks. Click OK. Then I'm going to modify my data set. I'm going to right click on films and choose to jump directly to the query. Let's include some information from, let's say, the country table next. I'll expand the country table and then check the box for the country field. I can then click OK. If I wanted to create another parent group, so for instance I wanted each country to be listed with the genres of films made in it and then the certificates of films made in that genre in that country, then we can just follow the exact same approach we took earlier on. I'm going to right click on the genre group in the Groups panel, add a group, parent group, then I'm going to choose to group by country, and I'll also add a header and a footer. When I click OK, fortunately a lot of my formatting is copied along with the extra columns that have been inserted, so you can hopefully see here, if I zoom in a little bit, I've got yet another set of these bracket symbols or these parenthesis symbols, indicating that countries contain genres, contain certificates. A little bit of extra copy pasting. I think I'm just going to copy and paste these headers and aggregates into the next row down, so I can do that fairly quickly and easily in the same way I copied my column headers earlier on. And then if I run the report again, this time I should see a group for each country with a list of genres of films made in that country with a list of certificates for genres in that country. I've got lots of subtotals at the bottom. I think I might have overdone it a little bit with these individual column headers. These could probably stand to be moved to the very top of the table up here. Again, we could put page breaks so that each country appears on a separate page, and that works in exactly the same way as we've already seen it. I can right click on the country group, group properties, page breaks, between each instance of a group, and then click OK. Another run of the report, and there we go, Australia on page 1, Brazil on page 2, and so on and so on and so on. So there you go, there's some basic information about how you can apply groups and parent groups and child groups to a single table. Hope you found some of that useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.